I'm back again, with another video nobody asked for. I was bored and I started going through every time Paulie comes close to dying in The Sopranos, and I didn't realize how stupid the list gets until I put everything next to each other. Some of these are obvious, like the Colombian who gets him on the floor with a knife, or the night he spends freezing in the Pine Barrens. A few only count because Paulie himself reacts like he's just survived something life-threatening, which feels right for a guy who thinks about death more than almost anybody on the show, and still somehow keeps being the one who survives.
Welcome to New York.
Jesus Christ, fucking Paulie Gautieri. Isn't he dead yet?
Everything that we do exclusive, make sure that it's all inclusive. I was taught make no excuses. As a man, you can't be useless. Man up cause these people ruthless. Hoes down, these thoughts clueless. Lobster Mac, I'm up at roof, Chris. From my tone, you peep the smoothness. In this world, you get the loot. Then your dreams is gonna be lucid. Fool me one time, shame on you. Second time, you gonna be foolish.
Okay, enough speaking. Let's get into it. The first time Paulie comes close to dying is probably the most serious one on this list, since Vito manages to stab him directly in the heart without ever being in the room. Finn finally tells the guys what he saw at the construction site, and once he confirms Vito is giving the security guard oral sex, everybody reacts about how you'd expect. Christopher wants Vito dead immediately, Tony keeps checking that Finn's actually sure about what he saw, and Paulie takes the hit hardest of anyone in the room.
I can't believe I stuck up for him. I feel like I've been stabbed in the heart.
I don't know what Paulie thought sticking up for Vito actually involved. It's a good thing he didn't stick up something else to him, though. Tony says he wants to think it over, and Paulie takes that badly too, raising his voice before catching himself and apologizing. Then he asks,
How much more betrayal can I take?
Even though this was a very close to death experience, he makes a full recovery by the end of the episode, thankfully. The Colombian robbery. Vito gives Paulie information about money being held by Colombians, and Paulie goes in with Carrie expecting the apartment to be empty and waiting for him around noon. The superintendent tries to warn the people inside, the door opens, and the whole robbery turns into a close-range gunfight before Paulie has much time to react. The gunfight alone is already enough to count. Paulie walks into a room where people are firing at him from a few feet away and survives long enough to find the actual money, which turns out to be hidden in the dishwasher. Okay, not this one. I meant this one. He still has another near-death waiting for him in the same apartment. One of the Colombians gets close enough to attack him with a knife, and the fight ends up against the wall with Paulie trying to keep the blade away from him. The guy drives a knee into Paulie's groin hard enough to drop him, stays over him with the knife, and Carrie shoots him before he can keep going. Carrie saves Paulie at exactly the point where Paulie has lost control of the fight. Paulie gets back up and finishes the Colombian himself, then spends a good part of the aftermath complaining about what happened to his balls.
Fuck my fucking balls!
The Italy case. Paulie's safest disaster is probably Italy, and the setup starts before he even gets on the plane. In Season 1, he walks into an upscale coffee shop with Big Pussy, sees Italian words all over the menu, and gets genuinely furious that Americans are making money off espresso and cappuccino. He starts listing everything Italians gave the world, while Pussy's trying to deal with the actual reason they came in, and eventually Paulie just steals an espresso machine, which is about as close as he ever gets to solving the problem. Then he actually goes to Naples, and the trip clearly means more to Paulie than it does to anyone else on it. Somebody calls the group Commendatore, and Paulie hears respect in the words, so later, at a cafe, he tries it out himself on a table of Italian men.
Commendatore!
He gets nothing. He tries.
Buongiorno.
One of the men glances at him the way you'd glance at someone asking for directions, then goes right back to his conversation. Paulie sits there a second, then calls the whole table cocksuckers. The man who ignores him is David Chase, by the way. Paulie spends his whole life insisting on how Italian he is, finally makes it to the actual country, and gets blanked by the guy who created him. Fortunately, he does survive this one too, embarrassed but alive. What did Christopher bring back for Paulie? Christopher gets shot in Season 2 and comes close enough to death. When he wakes up, he believes he actually went somewhere. He tells Tony and Paulie that he saw Brendan and Mikey, and he brings back one message for them.
Yeah, he said, tell Tony and Paulie 3 o'clock.
Paulie immediately starts treating Christopher's experience as useful information about his own future. Christopher describes what he saw. Paulie tries to decide whether it sounds like hell or purgatory, and before long, he's calculating how many years he personally might have to serve. He comes up with roughly 6,000 years, and somehow comforts himself with the idea that he could do that standing on his head.
I figure I'm gonna have to do about 6,000 years before I get accepted into heaven. I can do that standing on my head.
Because eternity's a lot longer. He's killed people, stolen for a living, and spent decades in organized crime, and his response to possible divine punishment is figuring out whether the sentence is manageable. Then he goes to a psychic and makes the whole thing worse. The psychic starts talking about dead people connected to Paulie, and the details become specific enough that Paulie recognizes some of the people being discussed. The dead apparently include men Paulie murdered. Suddenly killing somebody doesn't guarantee Paulie's finished dealing with him, which is probably the worst supernatural news he could receive. Paulie leaves terrified, and 3 o'clock stays with him long after Christopher's moved on. Season 6 eventually gives that warning a very strange payoff. Paulie has several more ordinary ways to die before he gets there. Pine Barrens gives Paulie enough material for several entries in the same episode. The whole disaster starts with a collection that's basically finished. Tony sends Paulie to get money from Valerie for Silvio. Christopher goes with him, and Valerie has the money. Paulie starts antagonizing him anyway. The argument turns physical, and Paulie and Christopher beat Valerie badly enough that they think he's dead. Now they have to get rid of a body that didn't need to exist in the first place. They take Valerie into the woods, make him dig his own grave, and give the man they're planning to kill a shovel. Valerie waits for an opening, attacks them with it, and escapes into the snow. Tony later gets enough information through the terrible phone connection for them to understand that Valerie has serious military experience.
The guy you're looking for is an ex-commando. He killed 16 Chechen rebels single-handed.
Get the fuck out of here.
Yeah, nice, huh?
So the guy they just tried to execute is a lot more dangerous than Paulie realized when he started the fight in the apartment. Paulie and Christopher chase him. Paulie believes he shoots him in the head, and Valerie disappears. The Russians still somewhere around them, but the weather starts becoming the more immediate problem. They can't find the car, cell reception's useless, Paulie loses a shoe, and eventually he can't feel his toes. When Paulie tells Tony, "We're gonna die out here," he finally has a reason to be as dramatic as he usually is. They find the abandoned van and make it through the night, although the cold and hunger start turning them against each other. Paulie thinks Christopher is trying to put the Valerie disaster on him. Christopher becomes convinced Paulie may abandon him or kill him while he sleeps, and eventually he pulls his gun on him. So one simple collection gives Paulie a close-quarters fight with Valerie, an attack with a shovel, a night where exposure is becoming genuinely dangerous, and Christopher pointing a gun at him from a few feet away. Paulie survives all of it. Christopher eventually lowers the gun, and Tony and Bobby come looking for them the next morning. Paulie's own gunfire helps the rescue party locate them. Most of Paulie's survival here comes from getting another chance right before the situation gets worse. He keeps receiving those chances even though he's the person who turned a routine collection into this mess in the first place. Apparently, the night in the woods also fails to teach Paulie and Christopher that hunger and anger are a dangerous combination. Christopher gets tired of Paulie making him pay enormous restaurant checks.
I can't remember the last time I ate this much.
Sure you don't want no dessert?
Not for me.
The argument outside the restaurant gets ugly enough that Paulie later admits one of them could have ended up badly hurt or killed. Christopher never points a gun at Paulie here, so this is one of the looser entries on the list, but Paulie himself is the one who says the fight was getting that dangerous. The person who actually dies is the waiter. He comes outside to complain about Christopher's tip. Christopher throws a brick at him, Paulie shoots him, and the two guys who were just worried about killing each other run away with the money. The next day, Paulie and Christopher make peace, which is nice for them and considerably less useful to the waiter. Does Tony actually kill Paulie? In Funhouse, Tony's sick with food poisoning and having the fever dreams that slowly push him toward accepting that Big Pussy's an informant. One of those dreams includes Silvio saying,
Our true enemy has yet to reveal himself.
Tony looks through a viewing device and sees another version of himself sitting at a table with Paulie. Dream Tony pulls out a gun and shoots him, and that's probably the easiest survival on Paulie's list, because Tony wakes up and Paulie has no idea anything happened. The dream's happening while Tony's mind is circling around Pussy, so Paulie gets murdered while Tony's still trying to identify the person who's actually betrayed him. Seems like the only way this guy gets to die is in a dream, otherwise he somehow always seems to find a way to survive. By season 6, Christopher's message has a lot of time to sit in Paulie's head. He's also dealing with the fight over Nucci and waiting on medical information after an elevated PSA. One night he can't sleep, notices that it's 3 o'clock, and eventually ends up at the empty Bada Bing. Paulie looks toward the stage and sees the Virgin Mary standing above it, and the scene plays like a horror reveal. He's already carrying years of superstition into the room, and now the exact number Christopher brought back from his near-death experience is tied to a religious vision in the place Paulie spends half his life hanging around. The show leaves plenty of room around what he experienced. Stress or hallucination can explain it, and the mirror shot keeps the supernatural reading alive because Mary seems to be visible before Paulie consciously reacts to her. Paulie certainly treats it as real. The scare changes what he does next, because he goes back to Nucci after cutting her off. He sits beside the woman who raised him, and the two of them reconnect in what I think is the sweetest moment Paulie has in the entire series. Paulie spends years afraid that the supernatural world is trying to warn him or punish him, and the vision that frightens him most sends him back toward Nucci. Paulie's prostate scare starts with the abnormal PSA, and later he tells Tony that it's cancer. The doctors caught it early, it's still encapsulated, and he's getting radiation treatment. The show never turns the cancer into an immediate life-or-death crisis, but Paulie still gets to add cancer to the list of things he survives. Paulie immediately starts trying to read some meaning into his luck. He wonders whether maybe he caught a break because he's done good things in his life. Apparently, decades of murder, robbery, and extortion still leave enough room in Paulie's accounting for him to think the good deeds might have balanced something out. Later, when Johnny Sack dies from cancer, Paulie compares Johnny's fate with his own and says he beat it. Johnny's death makes Paulie's survival feel a little less abstract. Cancer takes one of the most powerful men in New York, while Paulie, of all people, gets to sit there and talk about surviving his. Tony and Paulie have to leave New Jersey for a while because the FBI is looking into Willie Overall, Tony's first murder. Tony also has a much older reason to worry about Paulie's mouth. Ralph made the joke about Ginny Sack, somebody carried it to Johnny Sack, and the leak almost created a disaster with New York. Tony suspected Paulie for years, and he's right. Paulie was feeding information to Johnny, while Johnny was encouraging his fantasy that Carmine respected him. Paulie has always denied telling Johnny about the joke. Tony presses him again during the trip, and Paulie keeps denying it. Then Tony gets news that the Willie Overall investigation appears to be cooling down and suggests they rent a sport fishing boat. Paulie knows what happened to Big Pussy because he was there. Tony, Silvio, and Paulie took Pussy out onto open water, confronted him about cooperating with the FBI, killed him, and dumped his body into the ocean. Now Tony wants Paulie alone offshore after spending days getting more irritated with him. Once they're on the boat, Tony even goes after Paulie's laugh. He asks whether Paulie's ever been tested for Tourette's, imitates the and somehow gets Paulie to start wondering whether he really does have some kind of tic. Paulie can already kind of sense where this was going. Then Tony brings the Ginny joke up again. He makes an admission sound easy. Ralph's dead, Johnny's gone, years have passed, and Paulie can supposedly just tell him. Paulie might seem stupid, but here he does the smartest thing and keeps denying it. I think that denial is a big part of why he gets back to shore. An admission would confirm that Paulie secretly fed sensitive information to New York and almost created a major conflict, because Johnny knew how to flatter him. Tony's just spent the trip watching Paulie tell old stories around people he barely knows. Now the older leak and the current behavior are sitting in the same place. Tony looks at the hatchet and fishing knives while Paulie is exposed in front of him. He seriously considers killing him. The show leaves some room around whether Tony planned the boat trip with murder already in mind, but once they're offshore, the thought itself is clear enough. Paulie keeps talking and keeps denying the joke until the moment passes, and Tony lets him live. That night, Paulie dreams about Big Pussy and asks him about death. Pussy's the obvious person for his mind to bring back after a boat trip like that, and the dream tells us Paulie understood how dangerous the afternoon felt, even if he never says it directly to Tony. Then Paulie sends Tony and Carmela an extremely expensive espresso machine. Maybe Paulie simply feels generous. I think the timing leaves room for another reading. After spending a day wondering whether Tony still sees value in keeping him around, reminding Tony that Paulie's loyal, useful, and willing to spend money on him is a pretty sensible move. By the end of the series, Christopher's dead, Bobby's dead, Johnny Sack's dead, Tony's future looks terrible, and Paulie's still around. This is the same guy who spends years treating ghosts, numbers, medical tests, and random betrayals as signs that death is getting closer. Considering how often death actually does get close to him, Paulie's paranoia has a much better case behind it than it first seems.